So my name's Hazel Williams. I'm Associate Director at Regen, and Regen's a Centre for Expertise on Energy, aiming to transform our energy system for net zero. We're working together with Devon Energy Collective on a new project, and today is the official launch of the project Power Allotments Devon. The project's been funded by Devon County Council through their Community Energy Fund. And we have got Als Parker from Devon Energy Collective here to introduce the project, and our new graduate energy project manager, Shona Reid, who's working directly for the project, is going to give us a bit more detail. We've got about an hour today. Yeah, great, thank you for the agenda. So there's plenty of time for questions, and we'll keep going until the hour is up or the questions are up. So please do speak up when we get to the questions. You should be able to raise a hand and get in and ask those questions. The controls are down the bottom as we're in Zoom, so please do raise your hand when we get to the questions section. We'll probably go through both presentations first rather than have questions, because some of the things that you might want to ask Shona might answer in the second presentation. A few more people joined. I was just doing the instructions and saying welcome to everyone of today's event, which is the launch of our Power Allotments project, a collaboration between Regen and Devon Energy Collective. And I will pass over in just a minute to Als to start the presentation. In the meantime, if you want to introduce yourselves, there is the chat function, and we'll be able to see what people say. Give us a little virtual wave in there. Say hello. Wait, one more minute or so, and then we'll jump right in. I think that's probably enough, actually. I'm going to hand to Als. Als, would you like to kick us off talking about the Power Allotments process and the background to the project? Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Hazel, and thank you everybody that's taken time out today to come to this. I hope that we are informative and that you learn what you want to get from us. I can see that Barbara's just written in the chat, and I'd love it if people could all just, if they're happy to, just say hello in the chat, who they are, where they're from, and maybe why they're interested in coming today, so that we can get an idea of who's here. That would be really good. So I work for Devon Energy Collective. We're a not-for-profit community interest company. We were set up to help Devon meet its net zero targets. In May 2019, Devon County Council declared a climate and biodiversity emergency, and this crisis has been compounded by the current energy emergency that's happening right now. There's going to be more and more households this winter in Devon that become fuel poor. And we see this project as a great opportunity for cheap, clean, homegrown renewable energy, and we want to see the renewable energy owned by the local communities in Devon and benefiting the local communities in Devon. So we've come up with this project called Power Allotments, which, as Hazel said, is in combination with Regen and funded by Devon County Council's Community Energy Fund. And the idea behind it is that instead of acting as a commercial developer who goes out and looks across Devon at opportunities to connect big renewable energy projects, we want Devon's communities who live in the rural and town settings that they live in to choose where they think the best sites are for renewable energy. And that way we can look at those sites and we can map those sites, and we can see whether we can develop a pipeline of projects that could sit within local parishes and towns and be community owned. So if we could just go to the next slide, I thought for those that aren't aware, who don't know so much about community energy, I am aware that there's lots of you today that work in energy and work with communities. But what we mean by community energy is projects that are locally developed, locally controlled, locally owned, and the profits are retained locally. In Devon, there used to be 23 very active community energy groups. There's now quite a lot more than that. And there are some great community energy projects in existence. There's just a couple of examples off the top of my head. We've got in South Brent, we've got a 225 kilowatt turbine, a Vestas V27 that's community owned by South Brent Community Energy, and in Plymouth Energy Community has a community-owned solar farm at Ernesettle, which is an 18-acre site of 4.1 megawatts of electricity generation. So those are a couple of success stories that we've got in Devon. There's lots more. I, 5 years ago, moved to Devon. Before that, I was very involved in these two projects that I feel quite comfortable talking about, which are Westmill Solar and Wind, and also South Hill Community Energy. And there's some links there that you might want to scribble down if you want to find out more, especially the YouTube video. It's a bit out of date now, but it's really good to see. And that's the Westmill Solar and Wind Farm. And then the website for South Hill Community Energy. South Hill Community Energy is a great example of a site in an area of outstanding natural beauty that the local community believed would be good for a solar farm. It's a site that's sandwiched between a railway line, a B road, and a sewage farm on the outskirts of town and tucked away behind hedges. It was turned down for planning permission originally when we first looked at the site. And so the local community got involved, and actually 55 or so people turned up with umbrellas and stood in a great big line on the site. And we asked photographers to take photos from the distant footpaths to see what the visual impact would be. And this kind of group of people from the community grew until there was lots of people from the local area that were very keen on having a solar farm there. And it then got through planning and was built, and it now, before the change in energy prices, it was the surplus income was £370,000 a year from the solar farm that could be spent in local projects. So the idea of community energy is that all of the surplus income after the operating costs of the project can go back into local projects that respond to climate change and tackle fuel poverty. And there's also the opportunity to co-own the generator by investing in community shares and get a good return back from the scheme. So that's what we mean by community energy. Next slide, please. So the Power Allotments project, we're asking every parish in Devon to identify 5 acres of land for a community-owned solar plant. Ideally, the sites, and not every parish will have suitable pockets, but lots of parishes will. And ideally, the sites will be tucked away from homes, away from footpaths, unshaded. The land ideally would be south facing, and in land that's lower value to people living there. This is the idea of the project. And then there's an opportunity then for these small community-owned solar fields to be built in parishes across Devon for a smaller local income, because the 5-acre site is much smaller than some of the big solar farms that we're seeing that have been built in recent years. But we think that they are projects that are manageable for parishes and can be connected. Next slide, please. Ideally, what we want to see as well, on top of the 5 acres, is maybe another acre or so for wildlife habitats. We've got this vision that as well as the solar panels, we could have wildflower meadow, ponds, bug hotels, bat, bird boxes, native shrubs and orchard. And the wildlife habitats would also provide wider societal benefits as well as biodiversity gain. They would capture carbon, improve water quality, and provide pollination opportunities for insects. So that's what we think we'd like to see, the vision of parishes having their own community-owned power stations with wonderful wildlife benefits as well. Next slide, please. So the benefits, well, a 5 megawatt, sorry, a one number is definitely not a 5 megawatt, it's a 5 acre, a 1 megawatt solar farm is likely to generate in Devon about 1,200 megawatt hours per year, which is enough to power 400 UK households. The landowner would receive a fair rental payment, and then there would be a community fund, which would be all of the surplus income after the operational costs of the project. And we expect that to be around about £5,000 per year. It's pretty difficult to model at the moment as energy prices are going up and the market is very liquid. At the moment, electricity is a very different thing, but looking long term, if they were to settle, we're looking at about £5,000 per year for each 5 acre site. Investors investing it would look at a rate of return of around about 5% with the capital paid over 20 years. And in an ideal world, and the bit that everybody wants to see, is cheap electricity for the local people living close to the site. But at the moment, this and over the years, this has been blocked by regulation. There is a draft local electricity bill. Power for People has a really good lobby. If you're interested, please have a look at their website and sign up, and you can lobby your local MP. There are all sorts of clever and smart tools that people are proposing. There are energy local clubs that may be able to operate in the future from this sort of size solar farm. Yes, that's something we'd like to see, but we'll have to work on. Next slide, please. So the next steps are, well, Shona in a moment, who is the project manager on this project, it will take you through site finding. Once we've got a whole load of sites, it would be brilliant because we would have a lovely pipeline of projects that are backed by the local community. We would need to approach the landowner of those sites to agree the heads of terms. We'd need to apply for a grid offer from Western Power Distribution, National Grid, and we'd have to scope the project with the local planning authority and engage the key stakeholders. The idea is that we would prioritise the very best of these projects and take them into development, and they could be developed by the local community energy group that either identifies a site or is in proximity to the site, or my organisation, Devon Energy CIC, could develop the project on behalf of the community energy group. Either way, our aim is just to see these projects built. These projects are much smaller than anything that's happened in the last few years on solar. What we think we will need to do is do a sort of portfolio-led approach in order to find a contractor to build out this pipeline of small sites. And ideally, we would use local contractors to do this, and we would pull together a pipeline and do a build. I think the project probably would take about 2 years from finding the sites now to going through planning, legal work, and getting built. So that is that. And I think what I'll do now is pass you on to Shona, who's going to take you into the sort of nitty-gritty of identifying a site and the toolkit and the bits that we've put together so far before we go to questions. So over to Shona.
Thanks, Els. Shona, are you there?
So I am the graduate community project developer. I work for Region and the Devon Energy Collective on the Power Allotments project. And I'm just going to talk you through a bit more about the site finding process. Could I have the next slide, please, Emma? So I'm just going to talk through sort of 7 key things about what makes a good site when you're thinking about it. So first of all, space, obviously, as Als has already mentioned, we're looking for a minimum of 5 acres, but that is just for sort of the panels and the equipment that we would need. Ideally, we're looking for a couple more acres on top of that to get the biodiversity projects in as well. And then we want to look at being close to the grid. So one way that you can do this if you're out looking for a site is have a look at what the overhead cables are like near you. We're looking for sort of medium-sized cables, not as small as the ones that would be leading to homes, but obviously not the massive cross-country ones. or indeed being close to a private user, so a site that's near to something like an industrial or a factory area that might want to take all of the electricity from the solar farm. Obviously, if you're looking about proximity to the grid, we have our very useful power allotments map, which I will show you in just a moment, which has grayed out any areas that are further than 2 kilometers from an 11 or 33 kilovolt electricity cable, just so that there's something there to sort of determine which sites would be expensive once it gets past that 2 kilometer point. And then thirdly, we want to check that the site is sunny. Obviously, it's a solar farm. So shading around the edge of the site is good to sort of protect the view from other places, but obviously too much shading and it's not going to be great. And then fourth, land not used for other key activities. So things like high grade agriculture, we obviously want to keep that for food production. So just when you're out looking for a site, have a look at what it's being used for at the moment. And then road access. So the site being accessible by road in order to construct and maintain is obviously important. If there isn't existing road access to the site, then that will also have to be constructed. So that's just cost a bit more. And then we're looking for a good contender for planning permission. So this is really more about looking at what the site is currently, if there's any planning permission currently there for the site, just so we know what people are thinking about. And then the seventh point is out of sight. So we sort of want to minimize the visual impact on the local area. So picking a site that is maybe slightly more hidden from main roads, housing areas, and any like beauty spots. Can I have the next slide, please, Emma? So this is an example site that I'm just going to talk you through. So I just went to a random location on Google Maps and had a look in Devon at a site that could be good. And then I went through all of the 7 things. So space, I had a look at this site and I used Google Maps to measure the area because I didn't know it. And our handbook will talk you through how to do that. And at the bottom on the screen in the little white box, it tells me that the total area is around 27,000 meters squared. And just for reference, about 20,000 meters squared is about 5 acres. So I knew from looking at that number that it would be bigger than 5 acres. And when I converted it, 6.8, so that's good. Proximity to the grid, I can't see any overhead cables from Google Maps or from the street view. But obviously, if you were in the area, you'd be able to have a look around a bit more. But I did go to our power allotments map and it isn't in an excluded area. So I know that it's closer than 2 kilometers to a good grid connection point. And then thirdly, sunny. You can see from the pictures that it looks relatively sunny, and I can see that there are trees around the bottom of the site, and they are providing some shade into the field, but it's not covering the site at all. So that's good. And then land use. I don't obviously know what this field is being used for. I could take a guess that it might be grazing of some sort just from what I can see in the street view picture. And then there might be like a little trough in the corner of the field. I don't know who the landowner is, and you don't need to know who the landowner is when you're submitting a potential site. So, you know, if you do know, that's great, but it's not essential. And then looking at road access, I can see that there's a road all the way around the edge of the site, and there is a gate into the field, so that's good. And then planning permission wise, I had a look and there wasn't anything obvious planning permission for this area. So that again is good. And then finally, looking at it being out of sight, I can see that there are trees around most of the site, which is good. And when I went to Street View, the only place along the whole road that I could see into the site was the little purple marker there at the top, which is the gate into the site. So it's relatively out of sight from the main road, and there are no public footpaths in the area. So all in all, this could be a great site. Could I have the next slide, please, Emma? So once you've found your site and you think, okay, this could be a good site, if you head to our website, the URL is at the bottom of the screen there, and you go to the Devon Energy Collective and click on our projects, and the power allotments page is there. And when you scroll down, you come across this little blue box that I've circled in red there for you, which is the Power Allotments Toolkit. So that has a link to our handbook, the Power Allotments map, and the submission form. And I'll just briefly show you what is in them. If I could have the next slide. So the handbook is just a PDF, and it will take you through everything that I've just explained. And it talks about what sites are good, exactly how you submit a site, and it goes through step-by-step things like how to find the area from using Google Maps, and then what happens to your site after it's been submitted. Next slide, please. So we have the Power Allotments map. So this is a map of all of the possible places in Devon where the project is running. And in grey, you can see areas that we have excluded. So these are areas that are, as I've previously mentioned, further than 2 kilometers from an 11 or 33 kilovolt grid connection point. It also excludes urban areas. We're not looking at rooftop solar. We are looking for fields, sort of 5-acre sites. And then we try to exclude any high value agricultural land, just obviously because that has other priorities. You can see on the map in yellow all of the parish boundaries if you're looking within a particular parish. You can untick the little box on the side if you want to get rid of any of those layers just to find your way around the map a bit more, but that is there to be used, so please do use it. Next slide, please, Emma. So then you have the submission form. So this is literally an online form. You can click on the link. We'll ask for a couple of contact details so that we can contact you about the site, and then just as much information as you possibly can about the site. Don't worry if there's some information that you don't know the answer to, but anything that you do know is useful. And there is an option right at the very end just to sort of tell us anything else you want to know about the site. So if there's something that we haven't asked and you think we need to know about it, just go for it in there. And can I have the next slide, please? So this is just what we do when you've submitted your site. So you submit your site and you should get a little message that says that it's been submitted. And then I'll get all of your sites and I'll go through all of the answers that you gave me on the forms and have a look at your site on the map and look at any other constraints that we're looking at. And basically, we're just going to analyze and find which sites we think are the most feasible. And as Al has mentioned, create a pipeline of potential projects, and then start contacting people about the next steps, whether that's we think the site could be really good and how to help you going forward in that. Or maybe if we think the site maybe needs something else, or it's not quite ready for this project at this moment in time, we'll explain why it is that we think that. But yeah, next slide, please. And I think Al's is going to take over for the outcomes.
Thank you, Shona. So I guess just to wrap this up, what we want to get from this project is a whole load of power allotments across Devon that are under development, and could and would then generate clean, cheap, homegrown power. There will be lots of sites that just won't work because of the grid. But it would also be useful to capture sites that people believe are really good, even if the grid is a constraint, because another thing that we would like to pull together is a list of village scale solar farms that have been chosen by Devon's communities, because they will demonstrate the desire for community power. And I, at the moment, feel that community energy is very vulnerable. There's been some changes this week, and the government has lifted the ban on onshore wind development in England. It was snuck through, if you didn't see it, under the growth plan of the budget. And I am very concerned that commercial developers, possibly from a long way away, will come in and be looking for all the connections they can get to put in onshore wind and solar, especially in light of the energy crisis. And so I feel very strongly that we need to, as communities, demonstrate that we want to have our own community renewable energy generators that we own and benefit from. And so I would like, this project would like to see power allotments across Devon, and a great big list of projects that we also want to see that we can work on and lobby on and see whether we can get in the future. So I'm hoping that this project will do two things and will pull together further support for community energy in the UK. I think that's it from us. Is that the end of our slides? I think that's it from us. And so over to Hazel, who's going to be taking questions from everybody.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I was going to pick on some of the questions from the chat first of all, and then people got additional questions, then you can also raise your hand. But just to start with, not sure what Shona or Alice who wants to talk about this, but possibly Shona on considering the topography and the slopes within the site.
Hi, yes. So the sites don't necessarily need to be flat. They can be sloping. Most fields are sloping to some extent. Obviously, sites that are immediately like a north-facing site that is mostly shaded maybe isn't ideal. But as long as it gets sufficient sunlight throughout the day, it can still be sloping because there'll be somewhere across the site that we can put the panels in there.
Louise mentioned that we could have included that as a filter on the map. I think when we tried to do it, it made the map too large for the system and crashed everything. Yeah. So obviously we're expecting you to know your area and to bring that kind of local knowledge about topography where possible. So yeah, it just didn't work as the tool once we added that layer, unfortunately.
Hazel, can I just add on that somebody pointed out the other day that if you use Google Earth, which you can access online and you zoom in, it does have some of the contours on Google Earth, which is different from Google Maps. So if you wanted to have a look at that too, that might be useful for some people.
Thanks. And then I was going to come to Penny. You've got a few questions. I can't see you on my screen, but I'll let you ask those directly rather than reading them out. Is she there?
Yes, sorry.
Hello,
my camera doesn't work, unfortunately, but I can see you. Well, I'm sure it is no secret that Devon CPRE have objected to all these large solar farms that have been coming in recently over the last year or so. But this is, interesting in that clearly you're looking at smaller schemes. But my questions in no particular order were, have you not thought about roofs? Communities have roofs, whether it's village halls and all the rest of it. And I was slightly concerned about what you're talking about, the higher grade land only being grade 1 and grade 2. Well, actually, it does include 3A as well. And most of the West Country's land is grazing land. It's grade 3A and 3B, which is still valuable farmland, in part of the food process. And my last point, I suppose, was what happens if you've got several communities in a sort of small area that all think, they'd like to be part of this? Are you going to get several 5, 6, 7 acre schemes, which would then overall be a rather creeping development and give the impression of a much larger solar farm? I think there's some of my comments.
Thanks, Penny. I'm going to ask Alice to respond to those.
Hi, thank you, Penny. And we're really pleased to see you here representing CPRE. So the question on agricultural land classification, you're absolutely right. When we tried to put, so unfortunately our mapping layers didn't allow us to split 3A and 3B up. So we took grade 1 and 2 land out of the map, so that's excluded. And when we assess all of the sites that come in, anything that's grade 3A will also have to be excluded or put at the very bottom of the pile. And at the moment, grade 3B is appropriate in planning terms. So we would look at that and we will prioritize sites according to that, because you're absolutely right. We need to keep agricultural productive land being productive. So that's the answer to that one, I hope. In answer to rooftops, I've built lots of rooftop projects. I completely agree. And I am so frustrated when I see enormous rooftops, as I'm sure pretty much everyone is on this call all over the UK standing there without solar on the roof. It's a very complex project because with rooftop solar, you need to have really long-term owner occupier in the building to be able to sign that lease for 25 years. And a lot of the really super sheds, they just sort of pass on, they are short-term leases. So it does make it complicated. However, there are some organizations out there doing some great stuff. And if you know of any big roofs, I know Big Solar Co-op is collecting rooftops at the moment to try to do a big solar roof sort of launch, which would be brilliant. We've decided to focus on land. The main reason is because we want to build bigger sites. So we're looking at 5 acres, 1 megawatts, which will make a decent return back to a community fund to be spent to tackle fuel poverty and climate change. And I really want to see rooftop solar as well, but the separate income from rooftop solar is not going to have quite the same impact, although I think we need both urgently. So that's in answer to that. And your third point, I can't remember now. What was your third point, Penny?
It was about what would, I think the concern would be if you had several communities all adjoining parishes, and you'd end up with what would in reality envisage a very large solar farm if they all went into this scheme.
A very good point. Yes, absolutely. I mean, in answer to that, anything that goes to planning would have to look at cumulative impact, and so that's a really important part of the environment impact assessment that you do for planning. And so if there are other projects that are being looked at in the area, those need to be brought forward. I totally agree. It wouldn't be quite the same project if you had lots and lots of fields all around each other, all with solar farms. It would be the same impact, as you say, to one large one, but it would have to be brought forward to planning. I think really though, what we want to do is prioritize projects, and so we will be collecting all of the sites that come in, we'll be prioritizing them, and it will be only the very best of those that we will look to develop. And really, I can't imagine that they'll all be in a pile in a cluster, because they'd have cumulative impact. We'd already see risk there. So I can't see that happening.
My final question was just going off slightly on the tangent, but it's an interesting question to bet. Where does HMRC see these community schemes? I mean, I don't know anything about this, but with the tax implications, benefits in kind, that type of thing. Have you looked into that?
I'm wondering if anyone else on the call might know better, please butt in. But business rates and corporation tax to pay, we're given an exemption. But I wonder if anyone knows me in around the.
We're losing you a second. Yeah, she's just cut out for a minute there. I don't actually know a lot about the tax around it, but I know there are a lot of community schemes, and they've obviously taken that into consideration. I don't know if anyone wants to put their hand up at this point.
Can you hear me, Hazel? I've just switched my video off.
Yeah, that's better. You're back.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, and I don't know how much you guys caught of me. I wonder if anyone knows better than me, but there are business rates and corporation tax due.
We lost you again. I'm going to move on to the next. No, sorry, Als, you cut out again. I'm just going to move on to the next area of questions, which was about the technology. So Barbara was asking about battery storage and wind turbines. Shona, do you want to respond?
Yes, so on the wind turbines, so we didn't originally include wind turbines as the main focus, but obviously there's slightly more possibilities with that recently from the government. So if you do have a wind turbine site that you think would be good, there is an option on the submission form to select what type of technology you think would be suitable for the site. So if you think that you've got a really good community wind site, if you just click wind on that, and then you can write a bit more information about that, and we can contact you and talk about that specifically. As for the battery storage, I'm not 100% on that. That's probably more of a question for Als. I would think that it's probably very site and cost dependent. But yes, I can have a look into that more and put a question up on an answer up on that on the website about that.
Thanks, Shona. I don't know if we got Als back. Not yet.
I'm here. I'm just on a speed test. I think I'm okay, but am I okay?
Possibly.
I'm so sorry, everybody. It's one of those days.
You sound fine now.
Okay.
So we just had a question about batteries.
Right. Batteries. I don't know what the question was. What was the question about batteries?
That was about whether there would be a possibility of including battery storage for anything generated by the solar panels, or if there were wind turbines as well, you know, to allow for the days when it's not sunny or it's not windy.
Yeah, I mean, it would be brilliant. And it's something that we need to look very carefully on. But at the moment, we are trying to find sites as a priority that communities think would be good for generation. But yeah, there's all sorts of really good smart technologies and battery technologies out there that we would like to incorporate in this project. And they would also help, I imagine, with the grid connection issues that we're struggling with in the Southwest.
And then Barbara asked another question about the funding of the developments. So how each development would be funded.
Okay, so each development would probably be funded by equity that the communities can raise together. So there would be parts share offer, a community share offer.
Oh dear. Oh, sorry everyone.
Sorry that you can't hear me.
Yeah, no, we can't hear you.
Oh.
Shona, did you want to come in there?
I think I would probably just say that there are, if you head to the Community Energy England website, that has a lot of useful information on how community energy projects can be funded. And there are a lot of different options. I think most of them are either cooperative or community benefit. So people have shares in the project and they get returns on that either individually or into a community fund. But I would definitely have a look at Community Energy England's website that has a lot of information, or any other projects that you know of in your area. And Als is possibly better at explaining this bit. So I'll see if I can get her to, when she comes back, write something down and I can put it on the website.
Yeah, I wanted to follow that up with what is the size of investment required for a 5-acre gigabyte, whatever it is, site? What is the likely capital expenditure required or funding needed.
If you can hear me, there's a slide that I probably whizzed through too fast, at 1.2 million for a megawatt for all in for the cost of the solar farm.
And do you want to just comment on where that money comes from, Els?
Oh, sorry, did you not hear me? Okay, so so that money would come from equity. So we would raise, we would do a community share raise to raise perhaps 40% of that money, and then the rest of the money would come from debt finance, I imagine. That's the usual structure. There is, I think, more than £10 billion worth of Devon money, of Devon residents' money in ISAs. So we think there might be some money around that could be invested, and we're looking at kind of investment returns. I mean, everything's a bit scary right now, but when I wrote the presentation, we're looking at returns of around about 5%.
And then Sue asked, who decides how the surplus is distributed?
That's a brilliant question. So I think we're going to have to, each solar farm would set up as a sort of special purpose vehicle attached to a community energy organization that is asset locked. So it means that the surplus income would need to be spent on community energy projects, and it would be that organization that would distribute the surplus income. So we'd have to look at it and see how many projects there are in our portfolio that go to build and how we manage that. But ideally it would, each locality would be able to disperse those surplus funds as best they see, and ideally they would go to tackle climate change and fuel poverty.
Adam Dalglish, you had a couple of questions on this point. You want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you. On the 5% return, it's just interesting to know. I mean, obviously 5%, given what's happened recently aside, is quite a decent return. Does that include the return of the capital, or is that paid back separately?
No, that would, I think, include the return of the capital over the 20 years or 25 years.
Right, okay. And I guess the next point to that is, could you take the 5% return as a discount on energy prices? So with whoever your energy provider is, could you go from 34 pence a unit to 20 pence a unit?
In an ideal world, not at the moment. There's too much regulation against it, and it's all to do with anti-competition and making sure that it's fair for everybody and everybody's free to switch suppliers. There's so much regulation involved, but there's an awful lot of work being done at the moment, and in an ideal world, yes, the benefit would then go back to the local community. There are some examples. I think Delabole Wind Farm in North Cornwall, they are able to distribute a sort of fund to the nearest, I can't remember, it's done on visual impact 3 kilometres or something. There are some examples of different tests that people have done, but it would be so good if parishes could have their own power station and then benefit from cheap electricity. And it's something that we will be keeping an eye on.
There was talk about that, wasn't there, with the planning, that anyone who was impacted directly could benefit from cheaper electricity, but I don't know how much that's been firmed up or ripped up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something we really need to work on as a country.
Yes, it's something that government is currently considering, I think. There are benefits to it, but there's also benefits of this kind of model of people who have some money can invest, and there's also a community benefit fund generated that can be spent to help those who are the most vulnerable in the community as well. So that's kind of what this overall model is based around. So you both get the return for the people who are able to put that investment in, and you get a benefit to people who might not have invested but could benefit. For example, that fund could be spent on energy efficiency improvements in fuel poor households, and so you get that dual benefit. Anna Trant, you were asking about the AONB and kind of issues around the landscapes around Stoke Gabriel, which is obviously very beautiful, overlooking the River Dart. Shona, did you want to answer just how we considered AONB?
So they're not originally excluded in the grey zones, just because, you know, we didn't want to put too many exclusions on where you pick sites and what you're looking at, because you locally know the best places near you. Obviously, things like being an AONB will have to be considered in terms of planning permission. So I think it would very much be on the basis of each site. But I don't know if Al's wants to talk about the project that she worked on, one of the projects she worked on before here that she mentioned that was in an AONB.
Yeah, I guess we just didn't want to include AONBs because there are parts of AONBs that are discreetly tucked away and of lower value to the local residents living around them. So we didn't want to exclude them, but I imagine that the majority of the sites that this project picks up will be outside of the AONB. But if there is one that someone thinks is a good site, then we would like to look at it. I think that's really the best way forward.
Thank you. And then Chris Woodruff, you were asking about the landowner interest and support and how we've factored that in.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi, Chris.
Hello. Yeah, I think, well, just some experience of dealing with farmers and landowners. You can have great ideas about things that might take place on the land, but actually achieving it, the bottom line is it comes down to them saying either yay or nay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have to say, I've never really struggled with a landowner before in the past, because landowners are often quite interested in a rental figure for putting aside some land for solar or wind. However, I'm sure there are landowners that wouldn't want to see that. So I guess we thought we'd talk to the landowners next once we identified sites. The only thing to say is that landowners might be slightly disappointed, because we're not talking about the sort of vast rents that there were in the old days when there was a set subsidy for renewable energy. And so the projects were making good money, long-term good money, and we could offer a really big lease. So there will be some big landowners that say, well, that's not really worth my while. But there will be others that will be up for it. And I guess if it's low grade agricultural land, it might not be of much value to them.
Can I just do a supplementary to that?
Yes, please.
Let's go ahead.
Well, one is just to understand exactly what you might be talking about, sort of rough ballpark figures, but the other is, I guess, and I'm guessing this will come out through your assessment process, is that low grade agricultural land might be high grade environmental land. And we're finding that particularly with things like tree planting schemes, and you'd probably be aware of, working through county about right tree, right place, or right place, right tree guidance. So I'm guessing you're applying the same sorts of principles to considerations around these.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're doing the mapping, we will be looking at all of the sites that are designated, and we will be looking into the history of those sites as well. So you're absolutely right. We wouldn't want to impact on anything like that. And then in terms of rental, it's, the last model that I did, which was a couple of weeks ago, the rental figures were around about-ish, depending on the grid connection cost, around about £5,000 per year for the 5 acres.
Thanks, Els. Sue, I think you've got the last question on here, which would you like to ask it in person? If you hover over your picture, yeah, you got it.
Yeah. When you have your list of priority sites at some point in the next few weeks or months, how will you publicise those sites, and how will you invite investment from anyone, maybe in different parishes to the ones that would specifically benefit from community surplus funds? But anyone could, in theory, could invest there, because 1.2 million is quite a lot to raise. And if you spread your net wider, you may get people who are interested in investing in a solar farm anywhere in Devon.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at Westmill Solar, they prioritised. So they, when it came to raising equity from the community share offer, they prioritized the sites, they prioritized postcodes. So they first went to a certain kilometre distance from the solar farm, and they tried to raise as much equity as they could, and then they went out from that. But the majority of Westmill Solar's equity comes from within Oxfordshire. I imagine, I don't know how it's going to pan out yet, because if we have a portfolio of sites and they all go forward and get built together, we could do one big raise of finance, or we could do individual raises. So it sort of depends how this project pans out, and this project's never been done before. And so we'd be very keen to hear your views and your expertise to make sure we get it right.
Okay. I think there's quite a lot of thinking about how appealing this would be, and obviously a fair return for investors who are of an environmental mindset, but also getting that publicised.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, and I think we're going to have to address this going forward. We want to get a load of sites together, a pipeline that we think looks good, and then we need to work out what to do with it, really. How to get, one of the big things as well is getting the grid connection. So we will then need to speak to WPD National Grid and get grid offers, which is also going to be difficult. And then, of course, as Chris had said, the landowner, we need landowners to agree, and we also need planning. So there's a lot of hurdles to jump. Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any final questions or points to raise? David Sharp, see your hand there.
Hi, just a couple of things. One, obviously DEFRA, the last time I looked on their website, were also almost promoting the idea of solar panels to farmers. And I'm a little bit concerned that they might have a more competitive point already, there's Chris Woodrow made. But also, on another note entirely, you've not mentioned ground source at all. Is it because you're only looking at electric?
Yeah, I mean, this project is for renewable electricity generation. But I absolutely agree. We need to be putting together as communities and looking at ground source as well. That's another project. Would you like to do it?
Well, I moved from Cambridge, and Cambridge is experimenting at the moment at Swaffham Prior with a community ground source village thing. And unfortunately, I'm here on behalf of Abbots Kerswell Parish Council. We're in a position where we haven't really got any allocatable land. Your map doesn't show it, but Newton Abbot is being expanded dramatically, and we're in danger of coalescence. And the space around us is being developed. So we're not really in a position to have a 5-acre site, certainly not council land. But something like a ground source might be a possibility. And it's also occurred to me plenty of times that around Devon, there are an awful lot of tin mines that potentially mean that you don't even have to drive a long shaft. There's a possibility of extracting energy that way.
Yes, thanks, David. So this project, as Al says, is focused on renewable electricity in Devon. As Regen, we support the community energy sector more broadly, and we just had a bit of a strategy meeting yesterday thinking about what other things communities need in terms of support, and one of those is support around community heat projects, bring that learning from places like Swaffham Prior over Devon and around the country. So that kind of did come up as a point for something that we could look to develop some support on of some kind, maybe a guide, or I don't know yet. But yeah, certainly there's focus to this project, but there is also a whole host of other things that you might want to do as a community to tackle the climate emergency. I think I'm going to wrap up there. say thank you everyone for attending and for your really insightful questions. As you'll have heard, lots of things that we don't quite know how it's going to work, but we're working on it. And the main thing is that we're really interested to hear your views and to have your engagement. Obviously, we would like you to go forth and look for sites, but also to tell other people about the project. Shona is our main person to be the person to contact when you have more questions, more sites available. As Helen says, how does it fit in with the Devon Carbon Plan? So it's kind of, this has come through about as funded by Devon County Council to their Community Energy Fund, which is part of how they are tackling the climate emergency, and is looking to get more generation, which will contribute to decarbonising Devon. Emma, would you just put up Shona's contact details just as the final thing, and then it's just over to me to thank everyone for attending, and thank you to Als and Shona for speaking today. Hopefully they're going to appear, but anyway, you will get an email with the slides, which have got all those contact details in them as well. They're not coming through, so I will let them come over by email. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Just to say one thing is, I think the Devon Carbon Plan is due to be published today.
Yes, launched today. Yes,
launched today. Yeah, so that's one to look at if you're interested.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.